are selling out many of their venues. If you look at Baltimore and what they've done in the last year.
Yeah, they're the poster child in the last year for price reduction.
They're the poster child, but what's happened in terms of subscriptions? If you look at Pittsburgh in terms of they didn't actually reduce their price itself, but they increased the number of concerts they gave for the same price the previous year. They've seen an increase in the number of subscriptions.
Why don't we pause for a second and run down for people what Baltimore has done, in case there are some who are not familiar.
You may be able to speak better to that.
No, I don't have it in my mind. Are we both going to be caught embarrassed on video talking about this wonderful thing and we can't offer specifics?
Well, if I understand, they've offered seats at $25 a piece to all comers.
Yeah, yeah.
And their house is much more full than it was.
Right. And they did that, what was it, for next season, when next season's tickets went on sale.
Right.
They announced that.
So,
and of course they have an exciting music director.
Right. So, you know, I've sort of stood back from that, and I've said to myself, Knight Foundation basically says there's a large part of the population that listens to classical music. There's a very small percent that attends. With several of the other orchestras I've worked with, I've looked at the level of saturation in the marketplace. Some of them have saturated the upper middle class, upper class, educated segments completely.
When you talk about saturated, what do you mean?
In other words,
sold as many tickets as they could?
They probably have sold almost as many tickets as they could sell.
Right.
And that in some cases, with one orchestra I am working with today, our calculation is that about 10% of the total population, adult population, has subscribed over the last 10 years.
In what size city is that?
About 800,000.
Subscribed in the past 10 years. But not all at one time.
No, not at all one time. So if you begin thinking about it in those terms, then you say to yourself, what's driving people away? And my conclusion, to a very large extent, has been the economics are driving people away and the value proposition.
Right. The economics meaning it costs too much and you don't get enough.
It's, I guess the way I would look at it, again, I'm no expert in the field, but I take this from my other work. The people, I believe, are demanding a different kind of experience. And as that experience has changed over the years, that demand has changed. The orchestra field has not moved its experience very much. And therefore the value proposition changed for people relative to the orchestra field. And pricing, as it has gone up, complementary to that, the experience in the breadth of the experience and the depth of the experience hasn't changed. And therefore the proposition is not as good anymore. And so my choice is, if I need to spend $150 to $200 for a household to go to a concert, and I look at that expenditure against many others, there are fewer people who view that as valued as they did previously. So I don't know exactly what that all means. I don't know if it's fact. I don't know if it's true. But as I look at all the data I've seen, both anecdotal and statistically, I've reached the conclusion that the value that the orchestra field generally is bringing to people has declined over the last 10 to 20 years.
The value as perceived by the people who do go and might go.
That's right.
But maybe particularly the ones who no longer go or
Absolutely.
Don't go at all.
Right. Because if I look at the orchestras have a significant retention problem, especially with first, second, and third year subscribers. I mean, it's running between 40 and 60% for those three groups. That, if you think about the cost of capturing a new customer, which is basically what the orchestra field needs to do constantly, that cost is prohibitive.
And probably rising. And you know,
Yes.
I have been told many times that the retention rate of single ticket buyers is just shocking. Jim Underkoffler, who runs the Philadelphia Orchestra, was sitting in that chair yesterday when we did an interview with him. Now, that may have nothing to do with the sequence in which these things get onto polyphonic, but he was here, and he said that the vast majority, and I've heard figures like 70% of their single ticket buyers only come once.
Right.
Which means they have a huge churn every year, a turnover of single ticket buyers.
Right.
So let me step back from what you're saying, and everybody, this is the dramatic announcement that I was teasing Paul that he had to make, and I think it is very dramatic. Okay, fact number one, which we haven't stated explicitly, but we know, and I think many people know, which is that the cost of orchestra tickets has risen for the last generation a lot faster than the inflation rate.
2 to 3 times.
2 to 3 times.
I have run that analysis on about 7 or 8 orchestras now, and in every case, it's 2 to 3 times, closer to 3 times the inflation rate.
Right. And you also are convinced, partly through analysis, partly through the seat of your pants, that pricing, high prices deter people from coming, which, by the way, is the simple law of supply and demand that works everywhere. But here, I was saying earlier that some people might say, oh, there's a long-term trend because of competition from other forms of art and entertainment and changes in buying patterns, last-minute decision-making for people not to subscribe, and that somebody might argue prices have increased at the same time that other social factors have made subscriptions go down. But I think the reasons you say that may not be so are, number one, you can trace an actual mathematical correlation between a dollar's rise in subscription cost and a % of people who no longer come. And secondly, which I think is obvious enough but needs to be stated, that you observe that if orchestras cut their prices, suddenly people buy more tickets.
Right.
So there, analytically and anecdotally, it seems like there really is a relation, and the high prices are keeping people
If we
away.
believe that there is a significant % of the population that has affinity to classical music, then what prevents them from attending? They've already established they appreciate the product. So what is it about the experience that we are providing them? What is it about the conditions that we're setting for them to attend? That's
Right.
where I begin coming to a point of saying, there may be some problems with the product and the experience. Yes, I'll grant that. But we also have data that show that when I decrease the price, people begin to respond. I wouldn't expect that if there were significant problems with the product.
So now many little Pandora's boxes or large ones start
right.
to open.
That's right.
One of them would be the Baltimore Symphony reduced its ticket prices. They had funding to cushion the budget impact of that. Similarly, the New York City Opera here in New York has had good luck lowering ticket prices to $25 for the entire house. They have funding to cushion the budgetary impact from that. Marketing directors always say, in my experience anyway, that when you lower ticket prices, you may sell more tickets, but you make less at the bottom line than you would have if you didn't lower the prices and sold fewer tickets.
Right.
So that it sounds to me, and I think you've said this to me, in fact, off camera on other occasions, that there is a financial structure that orchestras are locked into,
Right.
which prevents them from lowering ticket prices unless they found some funding source to offset that, which would not be possible in the long run.
Right. I think there's 2 factors. One is, I think there is a problem with the financial structure. And I know that many people in the field, believe that someone saying this outright is near heresy, right? Because it has some really significant implications for compensation of musicians, staff, artists, music directors